I'm going to list some names picked out from the Bible. I'd like to ask you to help identify them for me, please. Palti, Egal, Shaphat. Come on. We're a Bible people, aren't we? Shemua, Setua. Let me help you a little bit. Let me add two names to that. See if you can help a little bit. Caleb and Joshua. Now who am I talking about? The 12 spies, correct? The reason we aren't familiar with those first 10 names is that they were victims of the Grasshopper complex. And anyone with a grasshopper complex is not going to be heard of very long in God's book. In fact, the public career of these men that we didn't know their names of was only 6 weeks long, and they died in a horrible plague. The children of Israel were on their way to the Promised Land. They didn't take the short route, and they had not yet taken the long route. They had been 2 years since they had left the land of Egypt. They had spent some time around Mount Sinai, and now they had come to the border of the Promised Land. 12 spies were sent out by Moses, a committee of 12. To look it over. They came back with grapefruit-sized grapes. That's why we get the fruit of the vine that we call the grapefruit-sized grapes. And they called a meeting of everyone when they came back to hear the report. People were expectant. They were excited. They were looking forward to settling in at home. After 2 years on the road, it's time to go home, isn't it? And they were ready to go home. They were ready to go to the Promised Land. There were a large assembly gathered. And from the platform before them, there were 2 reports made. The majority report and the minority report. Both reports agree that it is a great and fantastic land. But the majority report sounds pessimistic. It reported back that the land, this land that has been promised to us, this land that God Himself has appointed leaders to lead us to, this land is too much for us, the majority report said. If you take the book of Numbers in the Old Testament and you go to the 13th chapter, I want to go over a few verses with you that describe this story. Numbers, the 13th chapter, and begin with verses 30 through 33. As this story is reported by Moses. And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are able to overcome it." That's the minority report. But the men that went up with him said, "We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, "The land through which we have gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature." And they continue with their report, "And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which came of the giants, and these 10 of the minority report say the following: "And we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." So that's interesting. They say the land will eat you up. Looks like the giants did pretty good with it by living there. They got pretty big. Numbers 14 and the first verse continues the story. The result of this pessimistic majority report. "And all the congregation lifted up their voice and cried, and the people wept that night." Now, I don't know what it would be like to be in the middle of a couple of million people all crying at the same time. My audiences cry, but they're much smaller groups. They even continued crying all night. It must have been a terrible sound. But they didn't weep quietly into their handkerchiefs. They wailed. Okay? You got to remember, they came from the land of Egypt. And their theme song was, "We are going to the promised land. We are going to a land of milk and honey." And now they wail all night. Not only did they wail, but they also murmured to Moses and Aaron, "Wish we died in Egypt. Wish to God we died in the wilderness these past 2 years. Why has God brought us here to fall by the sword, to endanger our wives and our children? We'd rather return to Egypt. Let's choose a captain and return to Egypt." Gee, the majority report really did a number on them, didn't it? Numbers 14, verses 6 through 10, the story goes on. "But Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, who were among those who spied out the land, tore their clothes. And they spake to all the congregation of the children of Israel, saying, The land that we passed through to spy out the land is exceedingly good land. They say, these two, If the Lord delights in us, then He will bring us into this land and give it to us. A land which flows with milk and honey. And Caleb and Joshua continue, Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. Their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Do not fear them. Now it's time for the congregation to respond to the minority report. And all the congregation said to stone them with stones. Now the glory of the Lord appeared in the tabernacle of meeting before all the children of Israel. What shall we say? The majority report is not always right. The minority report is not always popular. In fact, when it comes to the things of God, the majority seems always to be in the wrong. So if you're going to be on God's side when the world ends, you're going to be on the minority side and not the majority. What appeals to the multitudes is not proof of validity. Yet that's what the majority seems to be based on. You're on the wrong side if you base your opinion on the opinion of the majority. Thank God. Don't we thank Him today for Caleb and Joshua? 2 with the minority report, against the 10 with the majority report. There amidst the wailing. Can you picture that? I started to say, do it with me, but no, we probably wouldn't recover. Okay? Wailing, okay? Amid the discontent, we see these 2 men who did not have the grasshopper complex. They did not say, we are in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in grasshoppers in their sight. You see, the grasshopper complex has a huge result that I'd like you to examine. Numbers 14:2 tells us it's one result of this grasshopper complex is they said, would we to God we had died in the wilderness. I would remind you that God answered that prayer, and die in the wilderness they did, all 10 of them, including all those they had influenced. When God tries to send us forward, and we'd rather look back, and we'd rather stay where we are, He sometimes grants our wish. You see, God answers prayers that are against His will. Just pray it enough. The grasshopper complex causes us to act rather strangely when you really look at it. Numbers 14 verses 3 and 4 tells us that their reasoning left them. They said, would it not be better for us to return to Egypt? So they said to one another, let's select a leader and go back to Egypt. What? Picture that with me. Let's just follow it out. Let's say it happened. They choose a leader and they march back to Egypt. To who? To Pharaoh. Okay. Now the last time they were together, they were the slaves and their leader was Moses. And there were the plagues, and there was a chaos in Egypt. Especially the last one, the death angel. And Pharaoh's last words to them, take these people and go. There was a great deliverance. These around 2 million people were delivered, and there was a great destruction at the parting of the Red Sea. You remember that story, right? Moses and Aaron had been claimed to be speaking for their God. So can you picture if they went back? The 2 million of them had another leader, and they go back to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh says, where's Moses? What about your God? He remembers the God, doesn't he? They seem to have forgotten the God that led them there, but Pharaoh had not forgot that God. Pharaoh would say, he sure put me in my place. I don't want to deal with Moses or his God anymore. Get out of here. And they'd say to him, well, Pharaoh, it didn't work out too good. Would you make us your slaves again? The majority report sometimes can make you just lose your sanity. Doesn't make a bit of sense. The 10 spies with their grasshopper complex doom the whole congregation. Now Caleb and Joshua, they of the minority report, pleaded to the people. They said, the land is not going to be ours. The land is ours. It flows with milk and with honey. And there was a cattle are well fed. The bees have abundant flowers, and vegetation is flourishing all over the countryside. Caleb and Joshua would say, don't worry about the people and the giants. Remember, we have God. You continue in Numbers 14, verses 7 to 9. Caleb and Joshua say, the land we passed through to spy out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, then He will bring us to a land that flows with milk and honey. Only don't rebel against the Lord, and don't fear the people of the land, for they are our bread. And our way of saying it, they said, it's a piece of cake. Okay? It's easy. Just go in. Caleb and Joshua continued and said, their protection has departed from them, and the Lord is with us. Don't fear them. Now, Caleb and Joshua have gone down in history as great leaders. And those 10, and those that listened to them, went down in a great plague and heard from not again. The song still goes on. We teach it to our children. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho. And the saying still goes on from Joshua, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And Caleb, fast forward with me from Numbers 14 on forward to Joshua 14. The context is some 45 years later. Joshua has led them ready to take the promised land. And Caleb appears, the second one of the minority report. They have conquered the land now enough to divide it up. And Caleb comes to Joshua in Joshua 14, verses 6 through 14. The children of Judah came to Joshua in Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, you know the word which the Lord said to Moses, a man of God, concerning you and me, Joshua? In Kadesh Barnea. Caleb continues, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea with you to spy out the land. I brought back word to him as it were in my heart. Nevertheless, Caleb continues, my brethren, the 10 spies with the Grasshopper complex, who went up with me, made the heart of the people melt. But Caleb continues, but I wholly followed the Lord my God. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land where your foot has trodden shall be your inheritance, Caleb, and your children's forever, because you have followed wholly the Lord your God. Caleb continues his speech, talking to Joshua. And now, behold, the Lord has kept me alive, as He said there 45 years, ever since the Lord spoke the word to Moses. While Israel wandered in the wilderness, and now here I am this day, 85 years old. As yet, says Caleb, I am as strong this day as on the day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now is my strength for war, both for going out and for coming in. I like Caleb. I'm ready. I'm not ready just to go out, but I'm not ready to go out and lose. I'm ready to go out and come back. I'm ready. Now, therefore, he says, give me this mountain of which the Lord spoke on that day. For you heard in that day how Anakim were there, and that the cities were great and fortified. Caleb continues, but it may be that the Lord will be with me, and I shall be able to drive them out, as the Lord said 45 years ago. And Joshua blessed him and gave Hebron to Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, as an inheritance. Hebron, therefore, became the inheritance of Caleb to this day, because he wholly followed the Lord God of Israel. Now let's rewind to those 45 years prior again. Go back to Numbers 14, verses 20 and 24. The context now is Moses has just pleaded with God for mercy for the rebels. Who were the rebels? Those 10 that gave the majority report, and the Israelites who want to return to Egypt. Moses has pleaded for mercy for those. What a leader. I don't think I would have said that. Okay. In verse 20 of Numbers 14, then the Lord said, this is Moses talking to God, and God speaks back, I have pardoned according to your word, but truly, as I live, all the earth shall be filled with the glory of the Lord, because all these men who have seen my glory, speaking to the 10, and the signs which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have put me to the test, now these 10 times, and not heeded my voice. God continues speaking to those 10 of the majority report. They certainly shall not see the land of which I swore to their fathers, nor shall any of those who rejected me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him, this is God speaking, my servant Caleb, because he has a different spirit in him and has followed me fully, I will bring into the land where he went, and his descendants shall inherit it. So Moses carries out the promise of God about Caleb. My, could God read a person? Can He read people? Can He read you, and can He read me? A person at 110 years of age now, Joshua, had faithfully led the people of Israel for all this time. He's now 110, and Caleb, this 85-year-old, is coming up to him and saying, give me the land. For the toughest area of Canaan, give it to me. Let me conquer it. The very area where the giants of which the 10 in the majority report spoke, the very area that had panicked the 10, the fear of the giants. Caleb, now at 85 years old, said, it's mine. Give it to me, God. Let me at them. He conquered what had become a major city in Israel, Hebron. Now, Hebron is where Abraham, the man who God had promised all this land to originally, Abraham was buried there with his son Isaac and his grandson Jacob and their wives. King David was anointed king there, some 19 miles from Jerusalem. When you refuse, this is for us, when you refuse to give in to the grasshopper complex, there is no limit to what God can do for you. And there is no limit to what God can do for us as a church. The grasshopper complex will always be with us. The grasshopper complex is always associated with a challenge to go forward in the face of apparent, overwhelming odds. The grasshopper complex, the majority report, is always associated with the challenge to go forward when we would rather retreat. The grasshopper complex is always associated with upsetting the status quo and moving you into the area of change. So you want to see great things go for God, then we got to be willing to undergo some change. The grasshopper complex will cause you and cause others to fail. This church, this mighty Adventist movement, nears its climax. I believe that. The challenge for us is, shall we go forward? The air is as much ready for us now to reach out to it as Canaan was right for the Israelites in that day, the majority report was wrong. Do we see giants in your life personally, in your family, in your church? Shall we go forward? Shall we maintain the status quo? Shall we develop the grasshopper complex? Is the task before us to bring the three angels' messages and what we believe to this community? Is a task bigger than we are? That's precisely the truth. It is bigger than we are. The point is, but it's not bigger than He is. Let our spirit be one of trust in Him and obeying His commission to us. And let us never forget the 10. And certainly let us remember the 2. They focused in on the task that God assigned to them. And ours today is not to worry about those of the grasshopper complex. God has His part, and we have ours. Our God that we serve, He can add, He can subtract, He can multiply, He can divide, and He can shake up. Remember, Gideon had too many. The enemy was not enough. Why? Because the angel divided the enemy. Let me encourage you today. Be faithful. You know the promises. Be a Joshua. Be a Caleb. Let us be on with the task that we have. We be not of those who have the grasshopper complex. That is not us.
My boat of life sails on the troubled sea. Whenever there's the wind in my sail, but I have a friend who watches over me. When the wind turns into a gale, I know the master of the wind. I know the maker of the rain. He can calm the storm, make the sun shine again. I know the master of the wind. Sometimes I soar like an eagle to the sky. Among the peaks my soul can